Welcome to the Crazy Chicken People podcast. If you're crazy about chickens, then you're in the right place. Hey, what's up, chicken lovers? Thank you so much for joining me again today. In this week's episode, I want to revisit a topic that I covered once already, way back when I first started. I usually try to make sure that each week's show is about something new and different, sometimes diving into some pretty obscure or not often talked about issues that come with raising chickens. But this is an important subject, one that could literally be the difference between life and death for your chickens this summer. Dealing with extreme heat and keeping your chickens cool. It dawned on me just last weekend while I was out behind the barn working to finish up an extension I had put on one of my chicken runs, just how warm it was starting to get outside already. Now, luckily, that was just a short change in the weather, and it looks like we're back to the usual springtime temps for at least a little longer. But the triple digits of summertime in Northern California are right around the corner. And I want to make sure that I'm prepared to keep my chickens cool and comfortable when it does hit. So I went back and I listened to that episode I did last year. I wanted to make sure that I didn't rehash a bunch of stuff we'd already talked about. And after just a few minutes of listening, my first thought was, I can't believe people kept tuning in after this. I mean, it was pretty bad. I thought, who is this talking? And I can even remember thinking to myself when I had first posted it. At that point, it was just the second episode I had done, but I was thinking, I nailed it. This is pretty good. It was not. The info was good. The delivery was bad. It almost sounded like I was whispering really loudly, but not speaking confidently. And for me, it was pretty hard to listen to. I actually felt embarrassed hearing it, even with nobody else around. But that's not why I wanted to take another pass on this subject. I think there's a lot more on this topic that I didn't cover, so I wanted to take this week, before everyone's scrambling to drop ice in their water dispensers, to give you some ideas that can help you get ahead of the heat this year and even do some prep for the years to come. So there might be a couple of things we referenced from that early episode. Definitely going to talk about the cold water dispensing ice chest idea that I had come up with, but for the most part, new information. Might not be a bad idea to go back and listen to that first episode if you're just coming into your first summer with chickens. Just don't hold it against me if it doesn't sound quite the same as the more recent shows. As for this episode, I'm going to break it down into a couple of categories, starting with the most important things you need to provide your chickens this summer: shade and water. It sounds simple enough, but there are some things you can do to make sure your efforts are well spent, and that your chickens are going to be as safe as possible. I mentioned in that previous episode how important it is to make sure that your run has shade on it throughout the day, and that creating a space in there that's always shaded is ideal for keeping their water and making sure that some part of that ground stays as cool as possible. To take that a little further, I want to talk about the idea of deep shade or dark shade and some of the ways that you can help create that. If you're not familiar with the term, deep shade is an area that gets a first layer of sun blockage. This could be a tree over the top of their run, a shade cloth draped over the top or hung from a wall, a tarp, whatever. But then adding another obstruction between that and the area that your chickens are in. Having another layer to block out the residual sunlight or the heat that may radiate down can make a huge difference in how comfortable that space is for them. An example of this could be a big umbrella inside of a run that's already mostly covered by a tree. I actually have something similar to this. I stretched an old trampoline net over the wire roof of one of our runs that sits under a tree, and that keeps any sunlight from getting down and into that center area. I also have a shade cloth, that stuff that they sell at most hardware stores that people hang up in their backyards, hanging on the east and west walls of the run to keep the sun out of there in the morning and in the late afternoon. That all might sound a little bit excessive, but I've made it so that I'd say about half or so of that chicken run is fully shaded at all times of the day. And believe me, it does help. This is where I keep their food and water, their dust bath, and in the summertime, it's usually where I see them when I get home. You do want to make sure that the breeze can still blow through there okay. That's very important too. But having that area where the ground and their drinking water are all out of the direct light will definitely help your chickens to stay cool on those hottest summer days. And using the shade cloth is really nice because during the parts of the year that I don't need to block the sun, or even want as much sun as possible in there, like in the wintertime when you're trying to dry things out, you can just roll up the cloth and take it down, or even just wire it to the fence and roll it back out next summer. And it's super light. So if you want to hang it overhead, you don't need anything all that strong to hold it up. I'm going to try to take advantage of that before the summertime hits and stretch a piece of that over the top of the coop that connects to this run I'm talking about. Just adding that thin layer, maybe a foot or so off the roof to block the sun from hitting that metal roof directly, should help keep that little structure from getting so hot and radiating so much heat into the coop all day. I also like to spray the outside of the coop off with a hose at the same time that I spray the rundown when I get home, but I do think that that extra shade is going to help a lot while I'm gone. Now, if you want to do some long-term planning to beat the heat, you can look at planting a couple trees around the run that are positioned to block the sun during the peak heat of the day. There's also a bunch of vine-type plants that can grow up the walls to help keep things shaded. Just very important to make sure that they are not toxic to chickens. But there's a big variety of those out there. You can also plant some bushes either around the outside of the run to help block some of that sunlight, or even inside to give them a place to hide from that summertime heat. You'd probably need to protect that bush with some kind of fencing until it gets established. Chickens would probably destroy it before it's able to take off otherwise. But that added vegetation will give your run a nice look, probably attract some bugs for your chickens to hunt down, and I think they'd really like having that larger vegetation in there to get underneath and hide and enjoy a nice, cool, dark area to get away from that heat. Okay, now for a few quick things on water. I won't totally rehash everything from the last episode. We covered a lot, but I do want to hit on some key points. As I mentioned, it's really important to keep that water shaded. I like to do this even not in the summertime. If you can keep the sun off of those buckets or water containers that you use, it really helps prevent the growth of algae. But especially in the summer, you really want to keep that water just as cool as you possibly can. And even though it can be difficult, changing that water out as often as you can is also very helpful. Now, if you use apple cider vinegar in your water, it might be a good time to switch to electrolytes instead. That's going to help them to just stay generally healthy during the summer when they're losing a lot of things. And I do like to also offer fresh water as well as the electrolytes in different buckets. That way they have the option. If you like giving herbs to your chickens, there's actually a few that are really good for them in the summertime and can help them to stay cool and to regulate their body temperature. These include mint or peppermint, lemon balm, lemongrass, and red clover. If you want to go the extra mile here, you can steep the herbs by pouring hot, almost boiling hot water over them, seal that container up, and then refrigerate it, and then you've got a really nice cold tea to serve them the next day. They'll get the benefits of those herbs just by drinking the water, or they can eat the leaves out of there too. You can even drop some pieces of frozen fruit in there and make a really enjoyable treat for them out of it. Okay, I do want to talk again about the cold water dispensing ice chest thing that I built last year. Kind of proud of this because I'm pretty sure I invented it. I don't know, maybe not, but I've never seen anyone else with it. I'll give you a quick version of it. There's also a couple of pictures of it on my Instagram if you want to check it out. But I took a small ice chest. I think it was a 10-gallon one or so, but you can use just about any size. And if you don't have an extra one, I did a quick search on Marketplace, and you can get one that will totally work for this for like $10. But after you clean it out, drill a hole in the bottom large enough to push some tubing up through so that it fits really tightly. You could also use hard pipe here if you want to. It really doesn't matter. It just needs to be set up so that the water will drain through the tube or the pipe, but not leak through that hole into the insulated part of the ice chest. If you can use some 3/8 inside diameter tubing, you can actually slip that right over the threads of those little poultry watering cups. And then on the inside of the ice chest, you want to make sure that as the ice melts, it's going to get into that tube. And you can even cut some small holes in it and make sure that the water is seeping in through there if you need to. And then for setting the ice chest up, you'll want to get it up off the ground, probably about 1.5 feet, and cut that tube back so that when you put the water dispenser in there, it's at a reasonable height that the chickens can get to it. The couple of gallons of ice that you'll want to put in there will melt throughout the day. It fills up that little cup so that your chickens can drink out of it. And then I like to put a pan underneath to catch the extra as it flows out. They can then use this to get their feet wet, splash around a little bit. They seem to enjoy that. I used one of those rubber feed dishes for this, and I just put a small hole in the side so that the water never gets up higher than about a ½ inch deep. A chicken's feet are one of the main places that they actually shed heat from. So being able to jump in and splash a little cold water around throughout the day becomes another way to help them stay cool. I highly recommend putting one of these together, especially if, like me, you can't be around during the day but want to make sure they have a source of cold water. But if the redneck water cooler isn't your style, there's a few fancy items that you can buy to help keep your chickens comfortable while it's hot. A couple of these I did get, and I'll tell you what I think of those, and a couple I found that just seemed like they'd work good. Starting with misters, which can be really helpful. The first one I bought came from Lowe's. I think it's their house brand Cobalt. It's just a small fan that's built to set up on top of a 5-gallon bucket. It's got a little built-in water pump that feeds a couple of little misters that spray into the fan. I think it was $100 last year, but has gone up to about $130. I know that's a little pricey, but if you want misters without a huge investment or work to install a whole system, this thing is pretty awesome. It's battery powered, easy to move around, and I think it runs for about 3 or 4 hours on high before the bucket goes empty. Definitely enough to get through the hottest part of the day. I like it quite a bit. It's not as good as a legit, fully piped mister system, but I don't think your chickens will know the difference. The other mister I got, my brother actually sent to me. I was asking him for help to build a bigger version of the Cobalt one I just talked about, and he was like, dude, that's just way too much work. So he sent me one made by Lasco that sits on the ground. You hook your hose up to it, plug it in, and that's it. I make sure to put that in the shade so that the water in the hose isn't getting real hot before it gets misted out. And my chickens would just stand in front of that thing all the time. They loved it. They were even going up to the fence and drinking the water that was building up on the metal as it sprayed through. It must have been a little bit cooler than their other options were. It's a little pricier than the other one at about $200, but if you want a mister that can run all day without any work to install, this one's pretty good. And I'll put a link to all of these in the show notes so that you guys could check them out. The last mister I wanted to tell you guys about, I just found while I was looking up these others to grab the link. This one is super easy to install, and it's under $20. I don't have one, but I probably will get one just to check it out. It's pretty much just a small section of mister tube with a few of the little outlets on it. One end connects to a garden hose, and then the other end kind of looks like a lasso. It's just a circle of this tubing that you zip tie around a regular fan, like a round oscillating house fan. Probably not going to spray real far, but unless it's just a piece of junk, I don't see any reason why this wouldn't work just fine for cooling down a chicken run. And then the last item I wanted to review, I know I've mentioned this at some point along the way, but I had put one of those solar-powered ventilation fans on one of our coops, and it works great. I don't remember what brand I got, but all the ones on Amazon seem about the same. I think this was like $50 when I had bought it. Really easy to install. Maybe it took me 20 minutes, although I did mess it up the first time I put it in. And I don't know what I was thinking, but I had put it at the bottom of the chicken coop, thinking that it wouldn't just suck air in, but also kind of act like a fan into the run. And that was really dumb. The fan needs to be up high so that it's blowing out the hotter air at the top. And down low, it was quickly getting clogged up with feathers and shavings and just wasn't working good down there. But as soon as I moved it up, it was great. Coop ventilation is important all year long, and keeping the temperature down inside of there during the summertime is really important. A coop with a metal roof and no insulation under it, on a hot day, it can easily get upwards of 115 in there, maybe 120 degrees. And that'll cook your chickens if they just hang out in that. It's not good. So these really help to blow that hot air out, keep the air circulating during the day. And if you don't want to go this route, just be sure that you do have good natural ventilation through the coop. And do what you can to keep that structure cool. A good hose down in the middle of the afternoon will help a lot. And I swear that on some of those hottest days, when I'd spray the metal roof down, I would hear that water sizzle when it first hit. Okay, that's it for this episode. Guys, it is not too early to start thinking about getting ready for summer, and now you've got 2 shows worth of info to think about. If I invent any more cool chicken watering devices, I'll be sure to mention them. Till then, you guys have a great week. Take care.